Hey guys, what's up? It's Mark. Welcome to Bumbling Through Dungeons. Today, we're going to build Spider-Man in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. Let's go! Alright, hey everyone, hopefully you can hear me. I'm in the mask, but I want to try to do this whole video in costume because I was in it anyway for a thing that would take too long to talk about, and I was like, you know what? Now's the perfect time to record this video. So, I want to talk about making Spider-Man in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. And this is something that I've attempted to do, I've sort of kind of done, and I have a lot of thoughts about, so I'm excited to talk to you about it today. So, a lot of fun can be had in taking fictional characters from other universes and trying to figure out what type of Dungeons and Dragons character they would be. And I'm no exception to this. I've tried to build a number of different characters, and one of my favorites, as you might be able to tell, I don't know, the costume might be giving it away. One of my favorites is Spider-Man. And I have for a while thought, well, what would it look like to build Spider-Man out in 5th edition D&D? Because I play it a lot, and I don't play a lot of superhero RPGs. There's some interest there, but you know, I'm not sure that I would want to play Spider-Man in a superhero RPG, since so much has been done with Spider-Man as a superhero. But it intrigued me to try to recreate the feel of the character within D&D. So I set out to do that, and what I first tried to do was figure out, all right, what's the base class? Because what I landed on is that there isn't one class that is going to be able to recreate Spidey. And it's going to be approximations of what the comic book character and the movie character and the TV character is. But I actually think we can get pretty close. But to do that, I think we're going to need to do a multi-class. So then the question became, all right, what two, hopefully not more, but like what two classes can you mix together to make something that approximates Spider-Man, and what do you need in order for the character to feel like Spider-Man? So the first thing that I realized was that, you know, I initially said, all right, maybe Spider-Man is a rogue, because, you know, you even have the thief archetype for rogues that have second story work that lets them climb buildings and hop along rooftops, and to me, initially that made a lot of sense. But there are other classes and other ways that you can get climbing powers, and the way rogues fight, which is usually sneaky and stealthy and a lot of times at a distance, you know, they can get up in melee, but they're not going to be mixing it up quite as much as some classes. It didn't quite fit. And so every multi-class that I ended up taking seriously in trying to build out Spider-Man had a monk as the base class. Now I think this makes a lot of sense because monks are hand-to-hand fighters. You know, they're using their arms and legs, and their bodies are honed to perfection. So there's a lot of overlap with the sort of superhero, super strength, and hand-to-hand fighting that you see from Spider-Man. He's using his webs from a distance, and we'll talk about that in a second. But usually when he's actually fighting his foes, it's in close range. So I think the monk does the best job of that, but I don't think we're done with just saying, well, Spider-Man's a monk, because I think there's some other things that you can layer on top of it to make it even closer to Spidey. So I don't really see Spider-Man as a big spellcaster, but there are definitely some spells that I think are thematic in a way that lend themselves really well to Spider-Man and the powers and abilities that he has. So then it becomes not, you know, we don't want a ton of spells, but we want the right spells. And I think that there are two spells I have in mind that to me are non-negotiable if you're trying to make a Spider-Man build. And the first one is Spider Climb. So you either need to be able to recreate that ability somehow, or you need to be able to cast the spell so that you can literally walk on walls or ceilings or whatever else. To me, that one's non-negotiable. And the other one, of course, is web. So, you know, the ability to web up your opponents with a spell, and you could probably flavor it as something that acts a little bit more like Spidey's webs rather than a magical spell as we think about it regularly in D&D. It would still function the same way mechanically, but I think you could flavor it in a way that would make it seem very much like Spider-Man. So we know we need to get Spider Climb. We know we need to get Web. I do think there are some other spells that are thematic that could work really well with a Spider-Man build, but I don't know that they're necessary in order to get the feel of the character right. If you have those two, I think you're set. So then it becomes, all right, what do we multi-class into in order to get those two spells and some others that we think make sense? So there's actually a few spellcaster classes that can get those spells, and so it becomes which one makes the most sense. Now, if you're a full caster class, those spells, you're only getting up to level 2 spells. Web is a level 2 spell. I think Spider Climb is a level 2 spell. But in any case, you can take 3 levels in a full caster class and you're going to have access to level 2 spells. And the first one that I thought of that I think makes some sense, and I think you could roll with and make it work, is the Sorcerer. And if you did some, say like Monk 4 plus Sorcerer 3 for a 7-level multi-class build, you would have a number of mechanics and powers and abilities and the spells to do something that I think recreates Spider-Man. And the reason I say to get to level 4 in Monk is because at that point you have a handful of other abilities as a monk, so that you're not too low level. You can start to feel a little bit like a superhero. One of the things that they can do, even at low levels like that, is the slow fall ability that they have. So say you're jumping rooftops and you fall. Well, maybe you jump off a rooftop and you initiate your slow fall, and you might even be able to talk your DM into letting you use a grappling hook to like latch onto another wall or another building and use it as a sort of swinging mechanic, like a web swinging mechanic. You'd have to talk to your DM about that. I think it would be a cool way to flavor things, to be able to use the different abilities in tandem, but that's something that's not going to work for all groups. So okay, we've got Monk, we've got maybe Sorcerer, but I actually think there's one better than Sorcerer, and that's the Wizard. Now, not just any wizard, but a divination wizard. And the reason I say divination wizard is, one, they have access to the spells that we're going to need, and they have access to a bunch of other spells, so you could do some real thematic things with that. But the reason I say divination wizard is that they have the ability to see the future. So essentially it gives you an ability where you roll some d20s at the beginning of the day, at the beginning of a long rest, or I should say at the end of a long rest, and you can use those d20s then for anything. You can use it for one of your rolls, you can use it for somebody else's roll, because you foresaw the future. Now, I think it would be very easy to flavor this ability so that it's kind of like a spider sense, and it's a precognitive ability that helps you stay out of danger. And so I think you could apply it that way in a very thematic way that would make it feel like Spider-Man. So that to me seemed really cool, and it's a neat ability, and it also matches really well with the skills and abilities of the character that we're trying to recreate here. And the last reason that I like Wizard is that, Peter Parker, if you're going with the Peter Parker Spider-Man, you wouldn't necessarily have to. You could go with Miles Morales build, you could go more toward like a Gwen Stacy, Spider-Gwen. So there's a lot of different options. There's a whole multiverse of Spider-Men and women that you would have to choose from. You could be Spider-Ham, the pig. If you saw the Into the Spider-Verse movie, you'll probably be familiar with that one. But there's a ton of different people that you could try to emulate, but in most of them, Spider-Man is a bit of a nerd. And so I think that matches really well to the wizard class, because they're studying and they're bookish. And so if you have like a monk plus a wizard, is kind of the archetype of what Spider-Man is. He's trying to do good, he's trying to do the right thing, great power, great responsibility, but he's also kind of a nerd, and he enjoys like studying things, and he can get a little bit sheepish at times. And so I think those two in combination work really well from a role-playing perspective as well. So past that point, once you have a handful of levels in Monk and a few levels in Wizard, I think you're set. And I think at that point there's no real wrong decision as to which direction you go to make the character your own. at that point, I think you have something that's going to be able to feel a lot like Spider-Man, and it could be really fun to play. Now, I mentioned some of the other Spider-Men and women out there in the Marvel multiverse, and say you wanted to go with more of a Miles Morales build instead of a Peter Parker build, well, then you could take Shocking Grasp, which matches well to one of his abilities. Or you could take the Invisibility spell, which matches to one of Miles's abilities. So you could make it really thematic to different Spider-Men, not just Peter Parker. There are a handful of other spells that I think could be thematic as well. I'm not going to list all of them here. I'm actually going to link to a blog post in the description of this video that I wrote on my website, bumblingthroughdungeons.com, where I go into a little bit more detail. I come to the same conclusion about how I would build out Spider-Man, but there's a few things where I go into a little bit more detail about the character or the role-playing possibilities or the spells. So if you want to dig in a little bit further, I would encourage you to check that out. And if you have a better idea for how to build Spidey in 5e, I am all ears. I think that I would love to see it and test it out. I'll be honest, so this build that I mentioned in this video, I tried to make it. I was in a campaign and I played a monk and was going to, once I hit level 4, start to multi-class into a wizard. I was going to build this character, and at level 3 we TPK'd, so he died. And I never got the chance to really see my Spider-Man build come online fully. But it was still a fun character to play. Despite the tragic ending, it was still a fun campaign to play in. And at some point I hope I get to flesh it out up to level 7 and beyond to see how it plays thematically and mechanically, because I don't think it's an optimal build. It's certainly not going to be min-maxing to do max damage or anything like that, but from a role-playing sense, I think it could be really fun. And mechanically, I do think there's some interesting things going on in the interplay between wizard abilities and the monk's abilities that gives you some interesting options both in and out of combat. So if you do know of another way that you might build out Spider-Man in 5th edition, I am all ears. Please share with me, because I think it would be interesting to see the different ways people try to bring the same style of character to life. So if you use this video as well, if you use this idea and my way of building out Spider-Man, or even parts of it, I hope you have a ton of fun with it, and let me know, how it goes. If you do that, either here in the comments on YouTube, or you can always find me on Twitter at BTDungeons. And if you like my content, I hope you'll subscribe. But until next time, Excelsior, true believers.